This is big breaking news. Trump just warned us that we are being poisoned. We are being sprayed, and toxic chemicals are being released into the atmosphere, and the federal government is investigating it and looking into ways to shut this down. All right, that is what Trump just warned, and the head of the EPA, Lee Zeldin, is warning of this too. All right, this is big, and this is finally becoming mainstream, and the government is finally addressing this issue that's been totally unchecked for decades and decades now. And I don't know about you guys, but I saw a break in some of this geoengineering activity maybe for a month or two, but then I've heavily seen it the past week or two. All right, so I don't know what's going on, but check this out. Right, this was posted on Trump's Truth Social just last night. All right, you can see here it says, quote, Lee Zeldin, the Trump EPA is committed to total transparency. I tasked my team at the EPA to compile everything we know about contrails and geoengineering to release to you now publicly. I want you to know everything I know about these topics without any exception. Okay, so he's talking about these issues and how they are happening over the skies of the United States. We'll listen to that in just a second. There's also this page that's been set up by the EPA for geoengineering. And also check this out. This was a UN United Nations document that was released earlier this year in 2025, just a few months ago, talking about solar radiation modification, stratospheric aerosol injection, and different types of geoengineering and how they could have, quote, detrimental impacts to the atmosphere, okay, because they're releasing sulfur dioxide particles that can potentially create things like acid rain. All right, so the fact that Trump is talking about this and spreading this message, you can see he just posted this last night, October 22nd. He wants people to know about this, and Trump is in control of his Truth Social. All right, so most of the things that he is posting on there, he personally wants to post and approves of posting. All right, so let's listen to this really quick and then we'll talk more about it.
Concerned Americans have urgent and important questions about geoengineering and contrails. The American public deserves and expects honesty and transparency from their government when seeking answers. But for years, people who asked questions in good faith were dismissed, even vilified by the media and their own government. That era is over. The Trump EPA is committed to total transparency. As a result, I tasked my team at EPA to compile a list of everything we know about contrails and geoengineering for the purpose of releasing it to you now publicly. In other words, I want you to know everything I know about these topics, and without any exception. Instead of simply dismissing these questions and concerns as baseless conspiracies, we're meeting them head on. We did the legwork, looked at the science, consulted agency experts, and pulled in relevant outside information to put these online resources together. Everything we know about contrails to solar geoengineering will be in there. That means anyone who reads through this information will know as much about these topics as I do as EPA administrator. To anyone who's ever looked up to the streaks in the sky and asked, what the heck is going on? Or seen headlines about private actors and even governments looking to blot out the sun in the name of stopping global warming? We've endeavored to answer all of your questions at the links on your screen. In fact, EPA shares many of the same concerns when it comes to potential threats to human health and the environment, especially from solar geoengineering activities. The enthusiasm for experiments that would pump pollutants into the high atmosphere has set off alarm bells here at the Trump EPA. Prior to now, EPA has never been this proactive to raise awareness about concerns with geoengineering and to stop this activity from being scaled up. This is what it looks like when government actually listens to the will of the people and doesn't try to squash it. You can always trust this administration and this EPA to take your concerns seriously, answer your questions honestly, and carry out the will of voters with integrity.
All right, so you heard that there. This video was shared by Trump last night. All right, so this message is getting out. It's becoming mainstream. It's made its way all the way to the president. All right, so this is big because this is something that I've been talking about on my channel for years and years, and it's slowly grown. Okay, it used to be when this topic was brought up, people would say, okay, this is ridiculous, this is crazy. Then it was slowly, okay, maybe this is happening. And now a lot of people realize this is actually happening. And the message has made its way all the way to President Trump. All right, so this is big. Sharing the videos, getting these messages out, it has worked. And we could potentially see big change happening from it, okay? Florida actually just passed a law banning geoengineering and weather modification unless they have a specific use permit. They have to get special approval now. The permitting process used to be very open, and you kind of just pay a fee and you get the permit and you can do whatever you want. It is now much more regulated and highly controlled. These experiments that they're doing, and a lot of them have been denied and shut down entirely in Florida. Some of them are still ongoing, and some of them are even happening on a federal level as well too. But Florida just passed a law where airports have to report any type of weather modification or geoengineering activity that they are seeing, and that they are seen from their planes. Okay, if any type of weather modification planes are taking off from their airports, they have to record and track these flights now. All right, so, and it goes into a state database so they can have these records to potentially trace them to any type of events. Okay, because one of the big things that people are worried about is, of course, their health from things like sulfur dioxide particles being released. We will get into more of that in just a second from this UN document. But people are also worried about things like cloud seeding and places being overseeded, or storms being seeded potentially. That's what people are worried about. And increasing the rain amounts to where we see flooding, okay? And even if it's just 10 to 20% increase in rain from the cloud seeding, that could be enough. That could just be a few more inches of rain, or even another inch of rain could be enough to really put certain areas over the edge, especially mountainous and hilly areas where the water, it's a few inches spread out over all of these hills, and then all the water eventually goes to the low point, and that's where a lot of the cities and towns are, and we see flooding. Okay, this has been happening a lot in places in the Southwest. We've seen a lot of flooding in Arizona and New Mexico recently. Okay, but that's one of the big things people are worried about too, is just cloud seeding. Okay, and storms being, essentially supercharged to have excess amounts of rain, right? So it's pretty big that we are seeing this all the way from Trump at the federal level. He knows about this, and they are looking into this to stop it, right? This is something that for decades, if you talked about, a lot of people just kind of act like you're insane, right? And it's not. And check this out. This is a UN document released earlier this year. I believe it was released in May 2025. It's a solar radiation modification, right? This is a UN document they released. You can see this graphic here. It kind of shows the different types of geoengineering that is happening. So there's stratospheric aerosol injection, which happens at the highest level in the stratosphere. That is where they release things like sulfur dioxide to block out the sun. That is where you will see these big blanketed white, milky systems that are just like a blanket blocking out the sun, okay, very thick. Not every system you see is like that, but that is what it looks like, okay, and it creates this layer where the sun cannot penetrate down, okay. There's also cloud thinning, okay, where they thin clouds to potentially allow more heat to escape, okay, that's what they say. There's also marine cloud brightening, where they release certain salts into the air to, quote, brighten clouds to reflect back light into the atmosphere, okay, but it also even reflects it back down, some of it. And the UN is even saying this is dangerous, okay. You can see here that it says that large scale stratospheric aerosol injection could have a detrimental impact on the atmosphere. The use of sulfate particles, only one of the options being considered, could produce acid rain, changes in the chemistry of the atmosphere, and or depletion of the ozone layer. These environmental impacts mean solar or stratospheric aerosol injection may contribute to greater greenhouse gas retention in the atmosphere. Other outcomes of placing large quantities of sulfur or other aerosols in the atmosphere are difficult to assess, but potentially severe. Okay, that's one of the biggest things that I've been worried about, is the acidification, okay? Acid rain is created when sulfur dioxide interacts with water and sunlight, okay? It then creates acid rain, and for some reason we're releasing sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere in very high quantities in certain areas, and it's leading to acidification of the rain. Even if it's just a slight acidification, it acidifies the soil, and that potentially can cause major issues for the plant life and bacteria life in the soil over time, because certain nutrients are not available at certain pH levels. So if the soil is too acidic or it's too alkaline, then certain nutrients become unavailable to the plants in the region, okay? And then the plant can die, okay? It's not absorbing nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium the right way, or some type of micronutrient is now locked out because the soil is now too acidic, and the bacteria in the soil that breaks down the organic matter into nitrogen can no longer grow in the super acidic soil. Okay, so that's what's really going on. It affects the bacteria, it affects the plant life, and it affects our farming and things like that too, potentially. Okay, think about the crops if they are under continuous, our breadbasket, like Kansas, okay, Iowa, these areas, if they are under continuous cloud seeding or stratospheric aerosol injection, there could be an acidification of the soils there, making it more difficult for corn, soybeans, things like that to grow. All right, there's actually even certain GMO crops that are in the weight that are available but nobody really uses, that can grow in super acidic or super alkaline soil. I've seen certain GMO corn that is modified for that, okay, to grow in very extreme soils. Okay, so there's even a solution for that, is just to genetically modify the food even more so it can grow in these unhealthy soils. Right, so this has long-term effects. All right, you can see here it says to maintain its cooling effect, the stratospheric aerosol injection would require a continuous process of injecting particles into the stratosphere. As soon as deployment ends, the particles would begin to settle out of the stratosphere, and the accumulated effects of greenhouse gas emissions might accelerate dramatically. That's one thing I always thought too, is, they're so worried about greenhouse gases trapping heat. Well, doesn't this create a layer? Isn't this creating a greenhouse gas layer that can trap heat in itself? It's like maybe the sun heat coming in is reflected back, but what about all the heat underneath? It could potentially create these heat dome effects that we've seen before, potentially even in relation to these things, where it's the air mass is trapped underneath this blanket of this layer of sulfur, right, and gases. You can see here it says settle out of the stratosphere, and the accumulated effects of the greenhouse gas emissions might accelerate dramatically. Referred to as termination shock, the impact of a sudden stoppage of the stratospheric aerosol injection could include the abrupt loss of thousands of species, catastrophic weather patterns, and potentially large-scale loss of human life. Okay, that's something that I've brought up too. I've never read this document until today, this UN document, and it's pretty wild to see a lot of their warnings that I've been saying for years confirming it. All right, people have studied this. These are things that I've been worried about too, is we could see a collapse of certain weather patterns that have been geoengineered and manipulated for the past few decades. These certain patterns could just totally collapse if the cloud seeding or the marine cloud brightening, because not all the ships, but a lot of the ships that are transporting goods, okay, there's thousands and thousands of them just operating all day long over the oceans. A lot of them have special salts put into their fuel, so when they release smoke from their smokestack, it has these salts for the quote marine cloud brightening effect, where they brighten the clouds. Okay, so even the diesel for these big cargo ships is being manipulated to introduce these certain geoengineering practices that they want to introduce. Okay, and just think about that all around the world, operating 24/7. Like, these projects are going on continuously. All right, and if all of these things did stop at once, there could be a shock. There really could be, because life has been adapting to this. Okay, I was talking about how, certain bacteria, certain plants could die off. Well, some of them have been adapting slowly to the acidification. Okay, so some of them are used to it now, and if things went back to normal instantly, they might die off as well, right? So we're really kind of trapped. We're really kind of being held hostage by this geoengineering and these experiments that are happening worldwide. Almost every single country, every single industrialized country that has airplanes and air travel, air traffic, airports, has a geoengineering program. Okay, do you remember last year in, I think it was Qatar, Saudi Arabia, or UAE? I can't remember which. I think it was UAE, now they say it. They caused a giant flood from one of their geoengineering cloud seeding programs. Okay, do you remember that? Let me look that up really quick. This flood that happened from the cloud seeding, and the government even admitted it. This happened last year. Yeah, it was in the UAE, in Dubai, all right, in April 2024, all right. People speculated that this happened. All right, you can see here's just like a lot of articles for it. It says, what is cloud seeding, and did it cause the Dubai flooding? All right, some people are saying it didn't, but a lot of people were saying it did, because it happened right before. All right, so almost every country has these programs, and if all of these things came to a stop at once, we could see major changes to ecology and weather, things like that. And there's even kind of water wars going on behind the scenes, like between, let's say, India and China. Okay, they both have geoengineering programs, and they both will cloud seed and manipulate weather systems near the border to steal water from the other side, and essentially have the water rain into their rivers and their systems. So these things are already happening kind of behind the scenes, and now it's becoming a lot more prevalent. So Let me know what you guys think down below. Hope you guys are staying safe, staying prepared, staying stocked up out there. Hope you have big blessings for your life and your family, and I hope you have a big old blessed day.